The air was heavy with silence, not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that carries weight like 1,000 unseen eyes were watching. Rows of tourists stood behind the ropes, their chatter dying out as the tomb guard passed. Rifle in hand, every step measured, every turn exact. His presence was not just routine, it was ritual, carved from discipline and honor. And then, like a crack-splitting stone, the moment broke. A young man, maybe in his late teens, forward from the crowd. His grin was wide, careless, the kind that made parents pull their children closer. He wasn't here to pay respect. He was here to mock it. His sneakers squeaked as he stepped too close, laughing loudly as if daring the guard to notice. Some in the crowd chuckled nervously. Others frowned, veterans in particular, their eyes hard with quiet rage. The guard did not move, he did not flinch, he did not even break his stare. For the untrained eye, it looked like stillness. But for those who understood, it was the weight of centuries of tradition pressing into a single man's posture. Every muscle was locked with precision, every breath timed, every second a choice to embody something greater than himself. The boy laughed louder, throwing his arms wide as if putting on a show. "Come on," he shouted, mocking. "What's he gonna do, huh? He's just standing there." His voice echoed across the marble, and the once hushed crowd shifted uneasily. A little girl clutched her father's hand, whispering, "Why is he doing that?" Her father didn't answer. He couldn't. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the guard, waiting, wondering, because everyone knew there was a line you did not cross, and the boy was inching closer, testing fate, ignorant of the weight he was playing with. The guard's eyes didn't flicker, but something shifted in the air. Attention. A storm just before it breaks. The crowd held its breath. Phones rose. Some expected the soldier to step aside, to ignore the insult, to let arrogance win for the sake of avoiding conflict. But in the next heartbeat, they learned that truth, honor does not step aside, and what happened next would be remembered far beyond that marble courtyard. It would shake a spoiled boy, silence a restless crowd, and remind the world of a lesson it had forgotten, that stillness is not weakness. Stillness is strength. Asterisk. Before the silence, before the confrontation, there was a man, not just a uniform, not just a soldier, but a story carved from sacrifice. The guard, whose stillness would soon command the world's attention, had once lived in chaos. His name was not announced to the crowd. His service was anonymous, his identity hidden behind the polished discipline of the old guard. But beneath that rigid stance was a man, shaped by war. Years ago he had marched across deserts, felt the sting of sand in his teeth, and listened to the whistle of incoming fire. He had held the hand of a friend in their last moments, a brother in arms who had whispered, "Don't let them forget us." That promise had burned itself into his soul. He had seen too many names etched in marble, too many flags folded into triangles and handed to grieving mothers. When he came home, he could have walked away. He could have buried the memories and lived quietly. But he chose otherwise. He volunteered for the most demanding, most unyielding post in the military, the tomb guard at Arlington, where one mistake could tarnish the memory of thousands, where every step, every movement, every second of silence was a tribute to the fallen. To him, this was not just duty, it was redemption, a vow kept. And so, day after day, he trained his body and mind to move with precision. 21 steps, 21 seconds, 21 turns. Each number chosen with purpose, each action carved with ritual. Rain, snow, burning, hits, it didn't matter. The guard endured, because to him, pain was nothing compared to the weight of memory. The crowd did not know all of this when they gathered that afternoon. To them, he was simply a soldier in immaculate uniform, guarding a tomb most of them had only read about. But to him, it was personal. Every silent second was a prayer for the dead. Every polished shoe was a reflection of sacrifice. And then came the boy, the one who would shatter the stillness. He was not a soldier, he had never known war. He had never lost a brother in arms. To him the ceremony was not sacred, it was entertainment. He was the kind of boy who had been handed everything in life, never told no, never taught respect. His clothes were loud, his smirk louder, his phone already recording as if the world owed him an audience. Some whispered that he was the son of a politician, the kind who thought rules were for others, not for him. Others recognized his face from viral clips where he mocked teachers, laughed at veterans, boasted about money that wasn't his. Arrogance radiated from him like heat. And that day he wanted to prove a point, that tradition was meaningless, that honor was outdated, that silence could be broken without consequence. The stage for their collision was no ordinary place. It was the tomb of the unknown soldier, the most sacred ground in Arlington. Beneath the white marble lay soldiers whose names were lost, but whose sacrifice was eternal. To stand there was to feel the weight of 1,000 untold stories pressing down on your chest. It was not a monument of stone, it was a heartbeat of history. Tourists came with hushed voices, veterans came with tears, children came with questions, but no one came to mock until him. He leaned on the rope barrier as though it were a fence at a baseball game, not the threshold to sacred ground. He whispered to his friends, laughing, pointing at the guard's mechanical turns. "Look at him," he sneered, like a robot. "Does he even know why he's doing this?" His voice was sharp enough to cut the silence, and heads turned. Parents frowned, veterans stiffened. Some shook their heads in disbelief. But the guard, he did not move. He had been trained for this. He had endured worse, and yet something in the air shifted, because everyone knew this was different. This wasn't just a disrespectful comment from afar. This boy wasn't going to stop at words. The guard's jaw remained locked, but his heart tightened. He had seen men mock tradition before. He had seen flags burned, monuments defaced, rituals laughed at. But here, at this tomb, he could not allow it. Still, he said nothing. That was the code. His silence was his shield, his stillness, his defiance. The crowd could sense it, the tension building, the inevitability of collision. And in that moment, it wasn't just soldier versus boy, it was honor versus arrogance, tradition versus entitlement, silence versus noise. The guard had lived his life for this moment, though he didn't know it. The boy thought he was about to prove a joke, but what neither realized was that their clash would be recorded, replayed, shared across the globe. One would be remembered for shame, the other for unshakable strength. The ceremony was never meant to be entertainment. It was not a performance, not a tourist attraction, not a show for applause. And yet, that afternoon, the atmosphere began to change. The boy leaned further across the rope, his phone angled high, recording himself with the guard in the background. He puffed out his chest, exaggerating his laugh so the crowd could hear. "Check it out, guys," he said loudly. "This dude hasn't blinked in 10 minutes? He's like a mannequin." Some in the crowd shifted, uncomfortable. A veteran, near the back, muttered under his breath, his jaw tightening. Parents tried to distract their children, whispering explanations about silence and honor, but the boy didn't care. He wasn't here for history, he was here for attention. The guard continued his precise walk. 21 steps, 21 seconds, pivot, 21 steps back. His movements were flawless, as though carved from stone. But the louder the boy grew, the more the tension thickened in the air. The boy shouted again, cupping his hands around his mouth as if calling across a sports field. "Do you even know who you're guarding, or are you just pretending?" A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. A little girl whispered, "Daddy, why is he yelling?" Her father's face flushed with anger. Veterans shifted their weight, fists clenching at their sides. Reporters raised their cameras higher, sensing a story unfolding. Still, the guard did not react. That was the discipline, that was the code. His silence was not weakness, it was defiance. Every step he took was a refusal to acknowledge arrogance. Every turn was a reminder that honor was stronger than insult. But the boy took the silence as victory. He grinned, spreading his arms wide, as if to say, "See, he can't do anything." He turned to his friends, who nervously laughed, unsure whether to join him or back away. "Tradition's just a fancy word for being stuck in the past," he sneered. "You're wasting your life standing here, man. You think anyone cares? Nobody does. Nobody even knows your name." A veteran near the front snapped. His voice was rough, broken from years of service, but it carried. "Show some respect, kid." The boy turned, mocking him with a salute. "Yes, sir," he barked sarcastically, before laughing in his face. The veteran's hands shook, but he stayed rooted, his discipline restraining him from doing what his heart demanded. The crowd's mood shifted darker. Parents pulled children close. Phones stopped recording casually and began recording intentionally. What had started as a careless stunt was transforming into a confrontation that carried weight. The guard's eyes, locked straight ahead, never flickered. But inside, memories stirred, faces of fallen comrades, the weight of promises made. He remembered the whisper of his dying friend, "Don't let them forget us." This boy was trying to turn sacred silence into a joke, and the guard knew there was a line, and the boy was inching toward it. The boy wasn't satisfied with words anymore. His need for attention pushed him further. He stepped closer, lifting the rope barrier as if it were nothing. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A tourist dropped their water bottle in shock, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. "Look," the boy shouted, standing just a few feet away from the guard. Nothing. He doesn't even flinch. Robot soldier. Hey man, do you even feel anything? The air was suffocating. Veterans bristled. Parents covered their children's eyes. Some in the crowd muttered prayers, as if something sacred was being violated. Still silence, stillness. The guard did not break. He could feel the heat of the boy's presence now, but his training held him steady. Discipline, he reminded himself. Honor, composure. But the boy was relentless. He mimicked the guard's stiff march, exaggerating the steps. He laughed loudly, stomping his sneakers against the marble 1-2-3-C. It's easy. Who needs the army? I can do this. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were angry now, boiling silently. A woman shook her head, whispering, "This is sacred ground." Another man muttered, "Someone stop him," but no one moved. It wasn't their place. All eyes remained fixed on the guard, and that was exactly what the boy wanted. Attention, eyes, a stage. He strutted closer, so close now he could have touched the rifle. "Come on, soldier boy. Say something. Do something. You're just a statue with a pulse." The tension reached its peak. Veterans clenched their fists. Children buried their faces into their parents' arms. The world seemed to hold its breath. The guard remained still, but inside a storm raged. His oath demanded composure. His discipline demanded silence. But his soul, his promise, his very reason for standing there demanded something else. Protection. Protection of the tomb, of the tradition, of the memory of the nameless dead who lay beneath his feet. The boy leaned in closer, sneering. "What's the matter, cat? Got your tongue? Or maybe all that marching has fried your brain?" His voice cracked across the courtyard like a whip. Cameras zoomed in. Fingers hovered over record buttons. The crowd's whispers turned to silence, a suffocating hush that pressed against every ear. And still the guard did not break. Not yet. But the boy was not finished. His arrogance demanded escalation. He reached out, his hand brushing dangerously close to the guard's shoulder. Gasps erupted. That was the line. Everyone knew it. The veterans stiffened like they were back on duty. Parents whispered frantic warnings to their children. The crowd's collective heartbeat pounded in the silence. The guard's rifle gleamed in the afternoon light. Motionless, yet full of quiet threat, the boy smirked, unaware of the storm he was about to unleash, because in the next moment, silence would end, tradition would rise, and the world would witness a response that no one in that courtyard would ever forget. The crowd's breath hung in the still air, fragile as glass. Everyone knew the boy had gone too far. His sneaker soles squeaked against the marble as he leaned closer, his hand brushing the guard's polished shoulder plate. For a moment, a fraction of a second, it seemed impossible that the guard would move. His entire body radiated the same stillness it always had, carved from discipline and ritual. But inside, something shifted. The line had been crossed. The boy smirked, waiting for laughter, waiting for cheers, waiting for some acknowledgement of his performance. But what came instead was not laughter, it was movement, sudden, sharp, and precise. The guard pivoted with the force of thunder breaking the sky. His rifle snapped upward, the gleam of steel catching the sun, the motion flawless, drilled into muscle through endless hours of training. The butt of the weapon stopped inches from the boy's chest, halting with terrifying precision. Not an inch too close, not an inch too far, controlled, calculated, deadly in its discipline. The crowd gasped as one. Parents yanked their children closer, veterans stiffened to attention, reporters' fingers slammed on their record buttons. The marble courtyard exploded in the silence of shock. The boy's smirk melted, his laugh strangled in his throat. His phone slipped in his grip, tumbling to the ground with a hollow crack. He froze, staring into the guard's eyes. For the first time, he saw it: not a statue, not a mannequin, not a robot. A man, a soldier, a warrior who had carried the weight of war and loss, who stood not for himself but for thousands who could no longer stand. The guard's eyes were steady, cold as steel, unblinking as if carved from the very stone of the tomb itself. And then the words came. They were not shouted, but they cut sharper than any scream. The guard's voice was clear, resonant, trained to project across fields of battle. Step back. The command cracked like lightning. 2 words, but they carried centuries of weight. It was not a request. It was law. The boy stumbled, instinctively stepping back, his bravado bleeding away under the weight of silence and authority. The rifle didn't waver, not for a fraction of a second. The crowd erupted not in noise, but in stunned stillness. Gasps, whispers, hands covering mouths. A woman muttered, "Oh my God." A child clung tighter to her father, whispering, He spoke. The boy tried to laugh again, tried to recover, but his voice wavered. Chill, man. I was just kidding. His hands lifted in a mock surrender, but his face betrayed him. His arrogance had cracked. Fear seeped through. The guard did not lower his weapon. He did not blink. He repeated, slower this time. The syllables weighted like stone. Step back. The boy obeyed. His sneakers scraped across the marble as he shuffled backward, his hands trembling despite his desperate attempt to appear unfazed. His friends had already melted into the crowd, ashamed, unwilling to be dragged into his humiliation. He stood alone, under the gaze of hundreds, stripped of the arrogance he had worn like armor. The veterans in the crowd stood straighter, their eyes glistening. For them it was not just discipline, on display it was vindication. Someone had stood for the sacred. Someone had defended the memory of their brothers. The reporters' cameras flashed, catching the moment. The boy's wide eyes, the rifle poised with precision, the guard unmoving as if carved from the earth itself. The images would spread like wildfire, but in that moment, it wasn't about violence, it was about respect. The silence that followed was unlike any before. It wasn't just still, it was heavy, crushing, absolute. A silence so powerful it drowned out every thought, every distraction. The boy muttered again, weaker this time. I didn't mean I wasn't. His words faded into nothing. No excuse could stand against what had just happened. The guard, satisfied the boundary had been restored, lowered his rifle with the same precision he had raised it. He did not gloat. He did not sneer. He did not allow even the smallest flicker of pride. He simply returned to his stance, resuming the sacred pattern 21 steps. 21 seconds. 21 turns. The boy stood there, trembling, humiliated, every eye locked on him. For the first time, he seemed small, not larger than, not invincible, not untouchable, just a boy who had mocked honor and been reminded of its weight. And then came the sound that wasn't applause. It wasn't shouting. It was the sound of silence deepening, of reverence spreading like a wave. The crowd didn't dare break it. They didn't need to. The stillness was louder than any cheer could ever be. A veteran near the front saluted, tears rolling silently down his cheek. A child whispered, "He's a hero." And somewhere deep in the crowd, someone captured the perfect shot. A guard standing tall, rifle gleaming, the boy shrinking backward into the shadow of his own shame. The guard never looked at him again, or the soldier. The moment was already over. His duty was not to humiliate, not to punish. His duty was to protect, to remain still, to honor the fallen. But for the boy, the moment would never end. It would haunt him every time he replayed it in his mind, every time he saw the viral clip, every time someone whispered his name with disdain. He had wanted attention. He got it. Just not the kind he expected. The turning point had come, just for the boy, but for everyone watching, because in those few seconds the world had seen the truth. Honor does not bend, tradition does not break, and stillness, true disciplined stillness, is stronger than arrogance ever could be. The crowd slowly shifted, as though releasing a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Children whispered questions their parents couldn't quite answer. Veterans stood taller. Tourists who had come for photographs now realized they had witnessed something far greater. The boy, pale and shaken, retrieved his phone from the marble with trembling hands. The screen was cracked, but the recording light still glowed. He shoved it into his pocket, desperate to disappear into the sea of strangers, but he couldn't escape. Not really. The shame would follow him. The lesson would remain. The guard continued his march, unbroken, unshaken, timeless. To him, nothing had changed. To the world, everything had. The boy's phone was cracked, his pride shattered. He stood there, trembling, while the guard resumed his 21 steps as though nothing had happened. That was the sting of it all. The soldier did not even grant him the dignity of anger. It was over. But for the boy, it had only just begun. Security moved quickly now, two uniformed officers emerging from the edge of the courtyard. Their boots struck the marble in sharp rhythm, echoing like a verdict. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. The weight of what had just happened had already pinned the boy in place. "Sir, step aside," one officer said firmly, though his eyes burned with barely restrained disgust. The boy stammered, his arrogance drained away. I was just joking. I didn't mean anything. I didn't." His excuses fell flat in the heavy silence. The officers guided him back behind the rope, their grip firm, their faces unreadable. Some in the crowd looked away, embarrassed for him. Others glared openly. A veteran shook his head slowly, muttering, "Disgrace." The boy tried to recover his swagger, tried to laugh, but the sound cracked in his throat. "Come on, it was just for fun. No harm done." But no one bought it. Not after the rifle's snap, Not after the guard's command. Not after the world had seen him shrink in fear. The crowd's phones were raised high now, capturing every second. What had begun as scattered recordings was now a sea of lenses. From every angle, the boy's humiliation was being preserved. In hours it would be online. In days it would be everywhere. His name, his face, his smirk turned fear immortalized. The guard, meanwhile, never once looked back. He resumed his march, each step measured, flawless. His stillness was louder than any insult, his silence a roar that drowned the boy's protests. To him, the moment had passed. His duty remained. And that, more than anything, was what crushed the boy. He had tried to make himself the center of attention, but in the end he was nothing, forgotten by the one man whose reaction he had craved. The silence stretched on, broken only by the guard's boots striking marble in their eternal rhythm. 21 steps, pause, 21 seconds, turn, 21 steps back, eternal, unyielding. A woman in the crowd whispered, "Did you feel that?" It was like the air changed. Her husband nodded, his arm around their daughter. "That's not just a soldier," he said quietly. "That's honor made flesh." Reporters scribbled furiously, already drafting headlines in their minds. Some framed their shots, focusing on the guard's calm figure while the boy stood in the background, small and ashamed. The contrast was too perfect to ignore. One veteran raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. Others followed. Soon across the crowd, dozens of hands were raised in silent respect not for the boy, but for the guard, for the tomb, for the memory of the nameless fallen who had just been defended without a word wasted. The boy lowered his head. He knew he had lost. Not in a fight, not in an argument, but in the one way he never expected, by being ignored, by being nothing compared to the weight of tradition. And that was when the cameras caught the defining image, the gleaming body straight, face unwavering. Behind him, the boy's shoulders slumped, shrinking into the crowd. The picture told the story better than words ever could. Discipline towering over arrogance, silence triumphing over noise. By the next morning, that image would circle the globe. By the end of the week it would become a symbol, shared in classrooms, in barracks, in homes. People would debate it, analyze it, argue about it, but one truth would remain. The guard had won, not by force, not by rage, but by unbreakable stillness. The climax was not in the rifle's snap, nor in the boy's retreat. It was in the return to silence, the ritual continuing, the unbroken pattern. Because in that moment, the world understood. Chaos had tried to intrude. Arrogance had tried to mock, but tradition endured. The tomb guard walked on, and nothing could stop him. The boy was gone now, escorted from the courtyard under the steady grip of security. The murmurs of the crowd faded into hushed reverence. What lingered wasn't laughter or shock, but something deeper respect. The guard, unshaken, continued his march. Step, pause, turn, step. His boots struck the marble with the same measured precision as they had before the disruption, as if time itself had refused to bend. For him, nothing had changed. For everyone else, everything had. At the edge of the courtyard, a man in full-dress uniform stepped forward. A colonel, his chest heavy with ribbons, his posture carrying decades of service. He had watched the entire incident unfold, his eyes hard and proud. The guard completed another set of steps. The colonel came to attention. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand in salute. It was not casual. It was not ceremony. It was personal, a recognition of duty carried out with flawless honor. The guard's eyes never wavered. His discipline held. He did not return the salute. He couldn't. His duty was to the tomb, not to individuals. And yet, the colonel held the salute firm, tears glinting at the corners of his eyes. In the crowd, a little girl tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "is he a hero?" The father knelt, his voice low and reverent. "Yes," he said, "but not because he moved, because he didn't." The girl's eyes widened, her small voice carrying farther than she intended. "He's a hero." The word spread like a ripple. People glanced at one another, nodding silently. No one applauded, no one cheered. But in that stillness, the truth resonated louder than any ovation. The guard, hearing the child's whisper, allowed himself the faintest breath of reflection. His hand brushed against the metal tucked inside his uniform Paquita dog tag, battered and worn, the last relic of a friend who had not come home. He carried it always, a reminder of why he stood there, why he endured the endless hours of silence and discipline. "Don't let them forget us," the whisper came back to him. Not as memory, but as presence. He straightened his grip on the rifle, tightening. No, they would not forget. Not while he stood watch. The crowd began to disperse, slowly, reverently. Some saluted as they left, others bowed their heads. The veterans lingered longest, unwilling to break the silence, as if their souls had found something they'd long been waiting for. The colonel lowered his hand at last, his gaze never leaving the guard. He turned, his expression firm, and walked away knowing that the lesson had been delivered more powerfully than any speech he could have given. The guard resumed his eternal vigil, unchanged, unmoved. Yet inside there was a quiet satisfaction, not pride, but peace. He had kept the vow, he had defended the sacred, not with rage, not with violence, but with the discipline of silence. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the marble, the courtyard returned to what it was always meant to be, a place of stillness, a place of memory, a place where the living honored the dead, and where honor itself stood guard. The boy would be forgotten in time, his name buried under his own shame, but the moment would endure. The image of the guard, rifle poised, unyielding in silence, that would live on. And somewhere, a little girl would always remember the day she whispered the word hero. Silence lingered in the courtyard long after the boy had been taken away. It was not the silence of awkwardness or fear, it was the silence of reverence. Something had shifted. Those who witnessed it knew they would carry the memory forever, but for those who would later see the recording, replayed again and again across the world, the lesson would strike just as deeply. The narrator's voice settles over the scene. Like dusk over stone, tradition is not weakness. Stillness is strength. Honor, tested under fire, does not shout, it does not boast, it simply endures. Across time and place, humanity has always looked for its heroes in the loudest voices, the boldest speeches, the fiercest battles, but sometimes, the greatest test of character is not how one fights but how one refuses to be moved. That God, nameless to most, faceless behind his discipline, showed the world that honor is not for sale, not for mockery, not for disruption. He did not draw his weapon, he did not lash out, he did not need to. By standing tall in silence, he delivered a message louder than any shout could ever carry, that some things are sacred, and sacred things deserve guardians. The crowd that day walked away different than they had arrived. Veterans carried themselves with prouder shoulders. Parents held their children a little closer, whispering lessons about respect, duty, and sacrifice. The little girl's word hero who echoed in countless minds, and the colonel's salute became a symbol, not just of one soldier honoring another, but of a nation remembering what discipline means. The boy who mocked may fade into anonymity, a footnote in the story of his own shame. But the guard's stillness, his refusal to falter, will live on. In a world so often distracted by noise, his silence became unforgettable, and maybe that's the greatest paradox of all, that in a courtyard where one voice tried to make mockery, the sound that people remember is not laughter, it is not insult, it is the sound of boots on marble, steady and precise, echoing against the walls of history. The camera phones recorded. Yes, the news reports replayed the footage. Social media turned the moment viral, but beyond the headlines, something deeper remained, a question, a reminder. Would you have stood so still? Would you have carried that much discipline? Could you, if the honor of others rested on your shoulders, bear the weight without flinching? Few can, fewer still ever will. And yet, the very existence of men like him, of guards who watch in silence through sun, storm, and snows, proof that discipline is not a myth, it is alive, standing tall in every generation. The guard did not do it for fame. He did not do it for applause. He did not do it to go viral. He did it because somewhere, deep within, he made a vow: they will never be forgotten, not while I stand. And so he stood. The outro lingers not only on the man himself, but on what he represents. Every soldier who has fallen, every family who has mourned, every oath taken and kept. The guard at the tomb is not one man, he is all of them, and that is why the world cares. That is why the world shares. That is why the world must remember, because tradition is not weakness. Stillness is strength. So, to you, the one listening, the one watching, the one reading this, Dory, ask yourself, what will you guard? What will you honor? What will you refuse to compromise, even when mocked, tested, or pushed? If the story of one silent guard moved you, do not let it end here. Carry the lesson forward, share it, tell it, remind others that in an age of noise, silence can be the loudest voice of all. And if you believe in honor, discipline, and sacrifice, then let the world know. Subscribe, share, and stand with those who stand for us. Because legacies only survive if we choose to keep them alive. The narrator's final words are almost a whisper, but one that carries like a drumbeat through the heart. He stood, the world saw, and in that stillness, we remembered what strength truly means.